We're recording. Hello, Saltines.
Hello, everybody. We're here for our uh bi-weekly
Bi-weekly.
podcast episode.
Yeah,
Bi-weekly? Really?
yeah,
Bi? Okay. Bye.
yeah.
Um,
So today, what we're gonna what
thank
we're
you. I like froze for a minute. I was like, what are we doing? Okay.
what we're gonna be talking about today um is something that has kind of been at the forefront of my mind for a minute. And I was talking with Mike about this.
I don't remember that.
Really? You don't remember it?
No, you're good. Just keep going.
I was talking with Mike about this, and I've talked to a few other people about it, about how there's still this weird stigma around baneful work. And not only is there a weird stigma around baneful work, but there's this weird idea of what baneful work is and what baneful work is not. And so we're going to be discussing a little bit about that today.
Yeah, I think this is a good follow-up because we actually, I think in our first season, we talked about baneful magic. We did an episode where we talked about like cursing and hexing and these kinds of things. Those practices that we would identify with baneful intent, right? And that's probably a good first thing to kind of maybe make a distinction around is that when we refer to magical practices as baneful, it is not necessarily the magical practices themselves that are baneful, right? Because you can see practices being utilized for both good and bad things. I think most of the practices, most of the practices out there that we would utilize for magical work are relatively neutral.
Yeah.
Right. The baneful component of baneful work comes in when we're looking at the intent of the caster, right?
Yeah.
It is the intent to do harm, to inflict harm, to limit, to punish in a malicious kind of way.
Well, historically, baneful work, and regardless of what you think, baneful magic, hexes, curses, jinxes, binds, return to senders, blasting, whatever it may be, historically in witchcraft and magical practices, these things have been done. There's been this weird push from a lot of the more new age centered communities, and with the rise of the threefold law in Wicca, of this idea that no, it'll return to you. So we have this really whitewashed idea of karma that has come about,
which is not
which
native to witchcraft.
Exactly.
Karma was not native to witchcraft.
Exactly. But the historical context of baneful magic actually comes from the fact that people who were not in power would use it to get the upper hand against individuals who are in power, who were doing things to harm them. And so baneful magic is usually a response to something that's already innately harmful or negative. And a lot of people seem to think that, oh, well, no, I don't do baneful magic. I just do return to cinders. I just return it right back to where it came from. Okay, so let's analyze that for a second. Okay, so you have a return to sender. You see return to senders in various practices. You see them not only in a lot of folk practices, conjure root work, hoodoo, traditional forms of witchcraft as well, but you see them even in less magical contexts, even in Christianity, in those things where you pray for the person who's praying for you to negate their prayers, and because it's this huge thing.
It's always funny, particularly when you look at you read the Psalms and things like for biblical reference on cursing, because cursing was huge in the Bible, and it always has been a huge thing in Christianity.
Yes, it has been.
And it's so funny when you read those though, and you can see the context of how they're written. And a lot of the Psalms basically just sound like two people praying to God to listen to me more than my enemy, right? Like, my enemy has prayed to you to do this harm to me, but for whatever reason, because my faith is stronger, you'll hear my voice first. You'll answer my prayer for their destruction first.
Yeah.
So it's always made me giggle because it just seems like a huge pissing contest.
Well, I think Israel Gardi actually said something around igniting yourself in prayer or something. So when we look at these things, a return to sender is still considered baneful, especially when you're doing it because you think that a particular person has sent something at you. I actually had this conversation with someone in the shop a couple weeks ago where they came in and they were new to witchcraft and they were new to everything and magic. And I could tell this person was very light workery. Not a big deal. Whatever floats your boat, we have something for everyone. And so they were talking about the need to protect, the need to protect, the need to protect, and how they're so protected because if they feel negative energy, they just send it back. They don't actually do anything harmful. And I stopped them and I said, okay, well, let's think about that for a second. If someone has thought really intense negative emotions about you, and for some reason they're able to direct that energy at you, and so you then just send that back at them, they have tag locked it for them and you, but then you've now tag locked it with your energy and it just gets sent right back. And so you're still continuing this cycle of baneful magic. Now, if you want to play the magical game of ping pong or volleyball, that's fine. But the reality is even a return to sender is baneful. If someone sends a withering,
if the initial intent was painful,
yes,
right?
Yes,
you can have somebody say like somebody does the healing working on you, and then in turn you're kind of like, I want to send some healing to you as well. Like that would be kind of like a return to sender that would be like, okay, like that would be an okay one, right?
Yeah.
Although I guess really that's not technically a return to sender.
No, that's not. That's you did something nice for me, so I'm going to do something nice for you. But if someone hexes you, let's say they hex you and you're just having this huge run of bad luck and your finances are failing or whatever, and so you do a return to sender and you're thinking, oh, I'm just cleansing myself, I'm cleansing and protecting myself, and then you send it back at them and you know who sent it. Even if you don't know who sent it, you're still going to be sending it with fervency. You're still going to be sending it with the intent of what you did to me doesn't affect me. I'm rubber, you're glue. That's what you're doing. And so there is no way around that idea that no one can do anything baneful. So when I have people come in and they're having that conversation with me about how they don't do dark magic, they usually say black magic. And then I'm always like, why you got to bring race into it? But it's always interesting because the minute you kind of point that out, you see their brain break.
Yeah.
Where they're like,
it's kind of a nice moment though, right? When you see somebody kind of like have that realization, like, oh shit, I never really thought about it like that.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I had this conversation with this woman and her entire just like, oh, yeah. And she went from getting, I can't remember what book it was. It was like a book. It was a book that's a little bit more on the more new age spectrum.
In our store?
Yeah. I can't remember what book it was, but it was a little bit more on the new age spectrum, still witchy, but like witch light, like diet witchcraft. Like you get the hankering fed, but you're still not getting that good sugar rush. She put that book back and proceeded to get a copy of The Devil's Dozen. It was like on complete like 180.
Well, The Devil's Dozen isn't, just to be clear though, that's not a book that's just on baneful magic.
No, it's not. Yeah. But she was scared.
Well, I'm sure because people come in and they see that book, and this is for all of our listeners out there. Just because you see a book or have some other sort of, like if you're in a shop like ours, or you see something online, whatever it is, and the word devil pops up in there, I think because a lot of people are coming out of Christianity and they're just so programmed, like devil, evil, Satan, devil, evil, Satan, right? Most of the time that word pops up in our sphere of spiritual practices anyway, that has nothing to do with like a Christian devil.
No, it doesn't.
Or Satan. That is so there is nothing inherently evil.
This is The Devil's Dozen by Jim McGarry. We do carry it in the shop. We actually have the newer expanded edition, which I would like to purchase, but I have, as you can see, I use this book. But there's everything in here from like raising the stain to the Buka vessel, skin turning, all is one, the light betwixt, like all these things. And they're actually, it's just really great rights, honestly. So I suggest everyone read that, but that's just me.
So I think you were going kind of down a path around like the idea that, or I should say maybe the interesting ideas that many people have around what really constitutes baneful magic.
Yes.
And really the easiest way I think to really kind of clarify that for the benefit of our saltines is magic is really only ever baneful if you cast your spell, if you do your work and you raise the energy toward what you're trying to materialize with the intent to harm in you.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're really, in essence, you're kind of just maybe just say doing like a bind, or maybe like you talked about how historically baneful work was something that was really always a component of witchcraft, or practices that we kind of loosely can identify as witchcraft now.
Magical practices.
You know, coming from different peoples, different cultures, right? But very often the whole purpose or the motivation behind that magic was really really kind of more seen as like a sense of like justice. You know, like this person has harmed me, you know, horribly, you know, and I need them to know what it is to suffer the way that they have made me suffer.
Yeah.
I need to make sure that they are, and this is a good catch for the rest of you. If you're doing your baneful work, and we are absolutely pro baneful magic, we do baneful magic. We, you know, there's nothing wrong with that.
We are hex positive.
But if you are doing your baneful work, make sure that in your baneful work, as you are structuring your spells, make sure that you focus that energy in a way that you shape your intent in a way so that not only are you going to be able to inflict the harm, do the bad thing that you need to do for that, whoever that person is, for whatever reason, right? But make sure that you kind of round that off at the end with a, and this experience is going to be so shitty that you will make sure you never do anything like this to somebody again, right? It's not really beneficial to do baneful working on somebody if it isn't ultimately also going to teach them a lesson, right? And make sure that they are not just once again in a situation to go out and hurt someone else, right? It's like, I mean, perfect example, like, you know, we've done curses and we've done things on sexual predators, right? A lot over the years. And, you know, and in shaping those spells, it's always good to like, you know, like, I need you to suffer. I need you to hurt. I need you to know what this feels like. I need you to whatever, right? And the circumstances of this experience, the curse, the spell I'm sending at you will be such that you will not be in a position to go out and sexually harm anyone again.
Yes.
You know, because if you're not stopping them from doing that thing again, what the hell was the point of even doing a curse?
Yeah.
Right. Curses need to be not only about your need for justice and your need to put a little bit of hurt back on that person, but also to make sure that that person doesn't do anything to anybody else like what they did to you.
Correct.
And if you're not factoring that in, then you're a selfish ass and you need to structure your baneful workings better.
That leads us down into this interesting path where there are people out there who will claim that they don't do baneful magic or dark magic or harmful magic, but they'll totally do the bitchcraft route where they'll shit talk and they'll spread rumors and they'll spread gossip and they'll say things that are not true, or they'll try and make things seem one way or the other. And, you know, we run into our fair share of that.
That's a constant.
That's a constant thing in the witchcraft
particularly
community.
When you get to a position within the witchcraft community like the one that we hold, where we operate a business, we are witches on a professional level.
Hey, buddy.
We interact with a lot of other witches locally and all over the world. And yes, and for some reason there are just a lot of people out there that don't seem to be able to play nice. You know, and people in the witchcraft community, they need very little. Like, they just need the slightest anxiety or the tiniest little bit of inkling. Like, they just, even for a moment, they think that somebody could be talking shit about them or their shop or their business or their spell work or whatever, and they are already flinging hexes and curses and shit talking. And I think it's important to remember, we've talked a lot on the podcast about how the power of the voice is significant in witchcraft, particularly when we structure what we speak with intent. You know, and I'm not trying to say that every time you shit talk somebody, you are cursing that person. But if you hold within yourself the desire for that person to suffer, you want that person to hurt, you want that person to whatever.
You are
right?
jealous.
And you are speaking those things out. You are absolutely sending that vibration out.
Yes.
You're absolutely sending that out there. And that could be real trouble for you because one, if that person hasn't actually done anything to deserve that kind of attention from you, you are energetically totally at a deficit. You are totally in the wrong, which might not mean too much other than the fact that that makes you a shady and a shitty person. But if you send energy at that or like that at someone who really doesn't deserve that energy from you, you are not just in sending that out. And that person's spiritual allies get in the way of that energy, you're the one that picked the fight. At that point, those spirits, they can do whatever the fuck they want to you. You threw the punch. At this point, anything that comes back from that other situation is basically what you deserve for picking a fight that you shouldn't have.
Well, and the thing is what most people don't realize, especially in the community, though you think they would, though they don't, is that people talk.
Oh yeah.
People talk.
Oh yeah, even people who don't like each other will still talk to each other for the benefit of sharing information.
Yes, spirits talk too. So one way or another, what you're saying will get back to the person that you are saying it at, especially if those people are legitimate witches and have worked magic around those magic and protective measures around that. Okay. And it will get back to them. And then when they find out, turnabout's fair play. So
this is seeming, I just want to be very clear, like this is seeming very personal with the way that we're putting, I think, emotion behind this. And so it's probably good to clarify that we have in recent weeks, we have had a couple of other practitioners locally in the area directing negativity our way and toward the shop at Cat and Cauldron. And completely unjustified. We have done nothing to try to bring harm to any of these people. These are just people who I think they're jealous. A lot of it does come down, I think, to just an insecurity, insecurity around their position within the local witch community. And I think that it's unfortunate. There's this idea that a lot of people have that if someone is more successful than me, that means that somehow I'm suffering. If they have more, that means I must have less, right? Or, that's such a fucked up way to think about these things because we do not need to be in competition with each other. That's so capitalist. We don't need to be in competition with each other. We can support each other's businesses, right? And so it's really unfortunate, but I wanted to qualify that because some of what we've said so far today does sound very personal. And it is. We've been dealing with this for a few weeks now, and we're resolving it. It's okay, right? And we're not resolving it in magical means. We're actually like going and having conversations with people and handling it like adults, which is going to bring us back to what you were talking about with bitchcraft. Yes. As opposed to witchcraft. Yes. Bitchcraft is not witchcraft, though witchcraft and bitchcraft do seem to go hand in hand. There is this nasty little thing that tends to happen with witches who are insecure with themselves and within their power. And it comes down to them shit talking, spreading rumors and shade, not only taking something that they may or may not have heard in a conversation that they were not involved in, so they should have just butted the fuck out to begin with. And then taking that, running to the person that apparently that conversation was about, stirring up trouble, and then creating more issues. The problem that we find when you try and interlace witchcraft and bitchcraft is usually you get more bitchcraft than you get witchcraft. Well, the bitchcraft is easier. The bitchcraft is easier. It's easier to sit and talk shit and spread rumors and gossip and allow yourself to sit in this, dare I say, lower frequency that just keeps you unhappy. That just keeps you unhappy and miserable. And then every single time something wrong goes on in your life, you have something or someone to blame that on. Well, it's funny that you bring up the whole thing about low vibrational kinds of energy, because this situation that we've been dealing with, and this is of late, this has actually been more of what I've seen happening, talking about this situation we've been dealing with, right? Where we've got other people who are actively shit talking us in our shop. Okay. And again, people we have done nothing to. We have done nothing to these people. We have tried to be good neighbors, and you're right. We doesn't want the money. We didn't even aware of.
Bitch,
Anyway,
I'm too busy making product.
well, and that's that's a good thing, because I guess somebody once said something to the effect of like, don't be worried about people who talk about you behind their back because they're behind you for a reason, right? And so anyway, so I guess where I'm going with that is that lately what I've noticed is there's this rise in popularity, and it is kind of slowly shifting. I think that's why we're seeing these people become more zealous and more like crazy, foaming at the mouth with their spiritual approaches and their cult-like behavior. But a lot of the new age shops, the light worker shops, the appropriators, the spiritual colonists, the racists, the people who are totally caught up in spiritual psychopath kind of behavior, right? Like these kinds of things. And they're out there. There are a lot of them, and we have a lot of them here in our area because of the Mormon Church. The Mormon Church, a lot of the people who leave that church, which is also a cult, they leave that church and they immediately jump into a new cult, which is usually just something light worker.
Or start another cult.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, but a lot of the new age shops have now started to speak against or are now talking shit about the witchcraft shops in the area because they think that we are evil, that we're bad, that we're low vibrational, right? And really the whole reason that they're basing that on is that we just don't tolerate their bullshit. People come in and talk with us and they tell us these things that they hear, these things that they're told by a light worker, a new age, or somewhere in some other place. And we actually give them real information. We are actually able to counter what they've been told with real information from multiple resources and give them something in the form of a spiritual practice that actually works instead of just filling their head with shit, and these new age light worker places, they don't like it. They don't like it because at the end of the day, what it comes down to is dollars. Yes, they're unhappy because we have hurt their business, which is why they have to shit talk us to other people. And it's not just us, it's lots of other witches. I was having this conversation with someone just yesterday about 2 stores in Denver or in the suburbs of Denver who had a situation like this. The last time we were in Colorado, we found out about this one shop that tends to be more love and light worker. And I do light worker because they're not light workers. None of them are light workers. They're also caught up in negative ego behavior and bullshit and materialism. None of them could be light workers really. But the light worker shop in that area telling everybody that would come in that the other shop in the area that actually is an occult and a witchcraft shop, and they are legit, they know what they're doing, right? That they were evil. And that people shouldn't go and shop at that other shop because they were evil. They were evil witches. And
they do dark
magic. And yeah, so this is something that happens all over the place. We know this happens like you were in New Orleans a few years back. And the hoodoo, the conjure shops in New Orleans, none of them can get along. They all fight. The owners of the shops all fight. They all hate each other. And it's the same thing in Massachusetts. I was thinking Lori Bruno. Laura Bruno. She was having, I remember a few years ago, I remember reading something I think it was an interview she did with Leo Martello in one of his books. This is many, many years ago, obviously.
Well, she was one of his teachers.
Yeah, but she was talking in there about how another shop in the area where she ran her shop had also kind of effectively, semi-effectively, had kind of been like just really shit talking her and her store. And so this happens all over the place, and I really, to be honest, I think it has more to do with just human nature than anything really spiritual. But people will couch this evil kinds of behavior, and it is evil. It is evil to talk shit, to say, to speak lies, and to try to ruin someone's reputation, someone's livelihood, because you have an issue with jealousy and personal insecurity. That's evil behavior. But people will couch that kind of behavior, human as it is, in spirituality. Like, I wasn't talking shit about this person and being a gossip. I was just trying to warn you because they're a wicked witch.
Yes, I'm trying to protect you.
Yes, I'm trying to protect you. I'm trying to make sure you keep your vibration high, which is bullshit because you can't keep your vibration high. That is not a real thing. Anyway, so it's odd, this, and I think it's something that people need to think about. I'm a little bit older, and I was kind of brought up not only just because these are my family values, cultural values, but also just as a witch and as an occultist, that your word is your deed. And that can be taken in a few ways. That can mean one, if you make a promise, you better fucking keep it. Don't say you're going to do something and then not show up. But that can also be taken to mean that if you speak it, is first step toward your action. And if you speak it and you put your intent behind that thing, that ultimately that is really kind of where you're directing your power.
Yep.
So people need to be, y'all need to be mindful of that.
We need to be mindful of it, but also let's look at a few things. What's more evil? Destroying a pedophile because they have abused and sexually assaulted all these other people and all these unfortunate children and stolen innocence from these people, or
I'm waiting for this comparison.
Or I forgot where I was going.
That's kind of a weird comparison.
Or shit talking. Okay. So
I think
if you're going to destroy the pedophile,
okay, go on. I'm waiting.
That's not for me. What I'm seeing is that's justification. That is true protective measures for the community and justice for those who this pedophile has destroyed.
Okay, but I hesitate at that though, at that kind of comparison or that kind of reasoning, because if we're being completely open, being completely honest about this conversation, for me as a witch to take it upon myself to curse up to the point of even death, to curse a sexual predator, right?
Mm-hmm.
To suffer for what they've done, and to also make sure that something happens around that situation so that they're not able to go out and repeat that behavior again. If I do that, I can honestly say within myself that I believe that to be an evil thing that I have done. Like that I have done a bad thing. I have deliberately sent death and destruction at someone who, though I may believe deserves it because of what they've done, I still have done an evil thing. It's very much a two wrongs don't make a right kind of a situation. Okay, now hold on. Okay, so I feel that way, but at the same time, I also feel that sometimes we have to do bad things to maintain a sense of balance. But sometimes we have to do the baneful work, sometimes justified as it may be, right? Sometimes we have to do that work to still bring balance or potentially even healing to that situation, right?
I guess.
And I don't consider myself an evil person. I'll be honest. I don't think I've ever really, I'm thinking of like, I've only in my lifetime, I think I've only known 2 or 3 people that I could honestly say like, yeah, this person was just an evil fucking person. And everything they did in their life was geared toward making sure other people suffered. I don't generally believe that people are evil. I think that all of us are capable of doing evil things, right? But I will say, and and I know it's going to sound like I'm saying like, oh, curses are evil. You should, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not in any way am I trying to say like you should never do curses. You should never do baneful magic. I think it has, for me, a lot more to do with the responsibility and the accountability that we all need to take for our practice. Right? Like you can't absolve yourself by saying, well, this person had it coming, right? For whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same breath, you can't say that or take that position and then completely like look at yourself as though you are innocent or blame free for that situation, right? Because now you've in essence you've added to the bad, right? You've also have now stirred some malicious and negative energies in there with your intent. And again, justified, right? Nothing wrong with that, right? Sometimes we have to do an evil thing to accomplish a greater good. That is the nature of the gray morality that
sometimes you got to be
evil witchcraft
to get rid of it.
Exactly. Sometimes, yeah, it's like if you're going to fight back a monster, sometimes you have to become a monster, and so I'm when you were saying that a moment ago, I'm like thinking like I would like people to start to be more honest with themselves around that, and again to be able to do that in a way where you're not all of a sudden feeling badly, or that you're not deciding, oh well, I'll never do another baneful working, because that's not a realistic position to take.
Well, no,
like sooner or later, life isn't like that. Sooner or later, something will come up and you'll be like, nah, I gotta hex this bitch. That's just how life works. And if you're not having that kind of moment, you're not really practicing witchcraft. I don't know what you're doing, but you're not really practicing witchcraft. these people out there who get to turn a blind eye to the injustices, not only in their life, but in the lives of so many other people in the world, and just get to go, I only ever work on white magic. I only ever do love and light based magic and spiritual work. Those people are living in a bubble, because that's not the world. That is not the world we live in. And again, and for me, it comes down to, I think, an issue of responsibility, or at least that example, a lack of responsibility and accountability, right? It's okay for me to say, I have to do an evil thing and I'm taking responsibility for this. And I don't feel badly about it, because at the core of my being, I really wish there were any other way to be able to handle this. But given the person that we're talking about, who I'm dealing with, and the circumstances of the situation, the only way that I can see to handle this is to actually curse the shit out of this motherfucker. Right. And that's the conversation that I have with myself pretty much every time I do a baneful working. I'm like, God, I really just wish people could be better. I really just wish this person could stop. I really wish this person had never done this thing.
Yeah.
I really wish that I did not now find myself in the situation that I have to do something. I have to step in and I have to put a stop to this person. But again, we don't live in that world.
True.
Right. So again, it comes down to it too, I think, responsibility around what we're doing with our practice.
Okay.
And being honest with ourselves, right? There's never I think how to word this so that I make sure this doesn't sound super confusing. I don't ever think there's I don't ever think there's a moment where you can say working a curse is a good thing. The results of the curse, particularly if it is justified and the person who is receiving that energy really deserves it, the results of the curse can absolutely be a good thing. But it is, I don't think, ever a good thing to work a curse. It's one of the reasons why we tell people a curse should always be your last resort. So I don't know.
Interesting.
But and again, I'm not saying don't do your curses and your hexes because you need to.
I personally think that if you're cursing the pedophile and you're versus shit talking the pedophile, cursing the pedophile is going to get something done, whereas the shit talking is just,
well, the shit talking can get something done too. I mean, if you go around shit talking to the right person and you happen to stumble across a crazy and violent person, they might just decide to go and beat the shit and or kill that pedophile, right?
true.
So either way, you could get results. But are really the results that you need or that you really want, right?
Punishment must fit the crime.
Ideally, it should, absolutely. So I don't know. The example you keep making of a pedophile is interesting, because absolutely, there's never any justification or any excuse for anything like that to ever happen, ever. And people who are doing that kind of thing, pedophiles, people who are victimizing youth and children like that, they absolutely, they need to be stopped. They need to be stopped. But that also, again, is one of those situations where I feel going into that curse, I sometimes feel like that sense of, I think, just general disappointment sometimes in humanity, where it's like, why can't people just be better?
Yeah.
Why can't people just be better? Why can't people not rise above this shit? And the instance with an example of a pedophile is a tricky one, because you're dealing with people who typically have fairly serious mental health problems of their own. I mean, there's obviously something psychologically wrong that an adult person would look at a child and go, oh yeah, I want to have sex with that, right? Or whatever that is, right? So clearly something wrong there, right? So again, so that's a tricky thing for me sometimes too. In that instance, I'm kind of like, what's the word? It's like, okay, so we have this conversation sometimes where we talked about, we have this conversation. I've had this conversation. I know you have to, where we talk about people who come in who are like, I want to do a baneful working on my ex, who's a narcissist, right? And doing baneful workings on people who have psychological and personality issues like narcissism, you have to approach those kinds of workings differently, because where you can clearly see, yes, this person did a really horrible, fucked up thing, right? Depending on the nature of that person's mental illness or whatever is going on with them. Hi, Toby. Um, they may not understand that what they did is a wrong thing. They may not understand like this is inappropriate. Like you can't behave this way. You can't treat people this way, right? It's like who was the I think it was Gacy, not Gacy. There's a Ed Gein. When the police showed up, this is an extreme example, but if I recall correctly, when the police showed up to Ed Gein's home and found all of the evidence of his crimes, right? All of the people that he had so brutally murdered and mutilated, and oh my God, he did all kinds of horrible things. Anyway, when conversations happened around that, um, the serial killer Ed Gein in that situation, like he didn't really understand, like he couldn't fathom how a lot of those horrible things he had done on those people he had mutilated and killed, he couldn't fathom that that was actually a wrong or bad thing to do. And so in that situation, and like I said, that's an extreme example, right? But in that situation, you have to kind of look at, okay, if I'm going to curse this person because they've done this horrible thing, you can't work a curse on someone like that or structure that kind of working on someone like that in the same way that you would for another person that you know understands, like, yeah, I'm just a shit human being for doing this. I should never have said this. I should never have done this. I should never have hurt this person in the way that they did. And they know they did wrong. They know they did wrong, right? So you have to structure those things differently, right? You need to if you want your spells to be effective anyway. So, but within that kind of that same area, that's where a part of me is kind of like, okay, I can work a hex on or a curse on a pedophile because they've gone out and they've done this horrible thing and they've harmed this child, these children, right? But in their brain, do they really deep down, do they really understand like that this is a really fucked up and evil thing for you to do? This should never ever happen, ever. And what you did is wrong. Like, do they really understand that? Right. And so in that situation, that's kind of where I hesitate, where I'm like, I really wish I didn't have to curse this person in this situation because I don't believe that they understand that what they did was as fucked up and wrong as it is.
Okay.
Right. And I'm going to curse them anyway, right? Because they need it. Right. And somewhere, as I mentioned earlier, in that curse, I'm going to make sure I put something in there to make sure that they cannot harm anybody else. Right. Because that's ultimately that's the real effect of your spell. Is I just don't want you to go out and hurt anybody again, right? Just don't do this again, right? That should be the goal of the spell, is to stop the harmful behavior. You know, if you need to punish them a little bit, cause some other kind of damage, wonderful. That's icing on the cake, right? But people don't think about that, right? Like we were having this conversation today. We were talking about an effort that some people that we know are making toward doing a magical working around the conflict that we're seeing, continuing to see around Gaza and the Israeli, particularly the Israeli government and military's just blatant disregard for the sovereignty of life and the freedom of people within that area. You know, they have blown up hospitals. They are killing innocent women and children, right? And which is really unfortunate too, because if you think about it, how many years, I was thinking about this the other day while I was having this conversation with someone, over the years, how many times have we captured, when I say we, I'm talking like world governments, you know, military forces and intelligence agencies, right? Over the years, how many times has a famous, if not famous, a well-known, a documented, a well-known and very publicly a notorious, let's say notorious is better, terrorist that would be involved with an organization, say like the Taliban or, you know, whatever, Hamas. These are those organizations that you know, and it's always the Middle Eastern ones, right? Which is so unfortunate because these kinds of organizations exist everywhere. They're all over the US. Most of them in the US are got kind of really primarily around like the neo-Nazi community and the white supremacists, but we have these terrorist groups here as well, right? So it has nothing to do with anybody's race or ethnicity. People can be hateful garbage all over the world, but they capture these people, like men particularly, who have done like have committed crimes, like terroristic level kinds of crimes, right? Where they've killed a whole bunch of people or bombed a building or blown up a church or whatever the hell it is, right? And they ask these people, like, like, well, why did you do it? Right. And they start to kind of take these person, usually through a process of interrogation, they take this person back to a point where, as a young child, they saw a member of an enemy nation who they now believe is an enemy nation, right? They saw someone come in and kill their families, right? And they grew up with that hate and that bitterness in them and that need for justice, which ultimately always is swallowed up by just the need for vengeance, right? And that's happening now. You've got Israel right now killing all of these people, shooting all of these innocent people, and the children that are surviving, how many of these kids are going to grow up and become the next generation of terrorists that the rest of the world has to now worry about, right? Because that's what happens. That's what happens, and so it's really unfortunate. But we were talking to somebody about getting involved in this situation, and through the tone of that conversation, all that kept coming up was like, yeah, fuck Israel. We're gonna fuck them up. We're gonna curse them. We're gonna send baneful magic at Israel. We're gonna harm. We're fuck these people up. We're gonna, and there's, and again, don't get me wrong. I'm just as pissed off with Israel's actions throughout this situation as everyone else is in this story that I'm sharing. Those of you who, I know some of you watch the podcast, right? I get it. I am just as disgusted, and I'm not trying to say that you are at all wrong in your position and feeling the way that you feel. The challenge with that, though, is that all you're really doing is pouring gasoline on a burning fire. Any magical work that should be done around that situation right now should be around establishing a ceasefire and bringing protection and healing to all of the people who have already suffered so much through this. All of these people, they've lost loved ones, whole families. I've got homes destroyed, right? Like life will never be the same, even for the people who have survived, right? Life will never be the same, right? And that should be the goal. The goal should be, we need to fix the situation. We need to help and heal and protect, and not just devolve down to this base human need to hit this person back because they hit me, right? It's a very schoolyard kind of mentality, right? Like, this person hurt me, I'm going to hurt them back. And sometimes that's totally valid, right? Like, trust me, I am not above, like, you punched me, okay, fucker, it's on, I'm gonna punch you back, right? Like, I'm not above that. But in this kind of situation, though, I'm like, this just seems like the wrong way to approach this, right? And again, the only reason I'm even sharing that information is that, to me, is, again, another example of how people need to look more closely and be more honest about kind of the foundations of their practice and the belief that they're putting behind their practice, particularly when we're talking about baneful magic. Okay, because baneful magic is something that should never be taken serious or lightly, should never be taken lightly, right? Baneful magic should always be considered a kind of a big deal, right? In that, like, you shouldn't just do this just because you can, right? So I don't know. We all just need to do better.
I agree.
Yeah. I feel like we were very preachy today, very preachy and lectury on the podcast today. I'm sitting far enough back. Hopefully this thing records me.
Yeah, it's
hopefully you have heard my voice.
I'm sure.
Sometimes I'm very quiet on the podcast because you project, and I don't, because I don't have the lung capacity.
Has nothing to do with the capacity.
No, the fact that I'm in a chronic state of asthma doesn't have anything to do with me being able to breathe and project as I speak.
Volume has nothing. More air doesn't.
No. Okay.
It's about how far the vocal folds are actually pulling apart and coming back together.
Well, what do I do to pull my vocal folds further apart?
You just speak louder.
But then I feel like I'm yelling. Isn't that what that is? Isn't that the definition of speaking louder? Is that yelling?
This isn't yelling.
Are you yelling at me? Anyway, Have we talked about baneful magic enough?
I think we've talked about baneful magic enough. It's important to understand. I think the whole purpose of this is like understand that even for you people, for the people out there who,
For you people,
even for the people out there who seem to think that you can get away with not doing baneful magic, chances are you will be doing some sort of baneful magic no matter what. You shit talk, that's baneful. You know, if you're not functioning from the what?
I'm just listening to you. If you're not functioning from the,
I forgot what I was saying. If you're not functioning from the position of trying to be a good person, and you're functioning from the position of trying to get back at someone, baneful.
basically, yeah. I mean that's it, you know. And again, there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but at least own it. At least be honest enough with yourself to admit that, like, yeah, I had a shitty day and I had to curse this person, you know. And I don't necessarily feel bad about it, because you should never feel bad about your curses. That's one of the other important reasons that I talk about responsibility and accountability, is you should never feel bad about your curses. And if you anticipate that you're gonna feel bad about it, that's your first sign you should not be doing that curse. Because even if it's still deserved, if you feel bad about it afterwards, you just fucked up your spell. You just fucked up your curse. You cannot feel remorse for the curses that you do. You cannot feel badly about the painful work that you do, because you cancel out all your energy. Now it's gone.
Yeah.
That's probably another good thing to talk about, since we brought this up, or we're talking about this as our focus for this episode, is the idea around what justifies a baneful working. And I guess what I mean by that is, how to word this. People do shitty things to us, right? Sometimes because they are selfish.
Hurt people.
Sometimes because people are selfish. Sometimes we're impatient. Sometimes we're whatever.
Impatient, Toby.
Right? There are a lot of, he's very impatient. There are a lot of reasons for that people do messed up things to each other, right? And that's unfortunate, but that's very much just a component of humanity, being human and human nature, right? But in those situations, I think it's important for us to be able to look at that and to ask ourselves, did this person really mean to harm me? Did this person really mean to ruin my day? Did this person really mean to do this? Right? Because a lot of the time that people do things that hurt us, I think really, to be honest, they didn't mean to. Like they just weren't thinking. A lot of the times it's just ignorance, or just not knowing, or being self-aware enough to realize, like, oh, I probably shouldn't do this because it could have negative consequences for people other than me, right? And so it's important to look at that, I think, to be clear on that before you decide you need to curse someone. Okay? And I say that mainly because any energy that you send out, any kind of baneful working that you send out, again, it's got to be justified, or it's not going to stick. You're wasting your time and your energy with that kind of working. If it isn't justified, it's not going to go anywhere, you know. And that's the best case scenario. Worst case scenario is you send that energy at somebody, as we mentioned several moments back, and it wasn't justified, but they also happen to have some pretty powerful spiritual allies, and now you have picked a fight with somebody else's spiritual allies, and those spirits will get you. We have seen that happen a few times over the years to different people. So it happens to Austin all the time, because Austin's always doing baneful magic that is not justified.
Dude, I haven't done baneful magic in a very long time.
Oh my gosh, calm down. Jeez.
I'm trying to think of the last time I did a baneful work.
Oh my gosh, you're so mad at me. Are you going to curse me? You're giving me the curse eyes. No, Toby, save me.
No, I can't remember the last time I did a baneful work.
It's been a while, which is a good thing, I think, because I think that
I've been much more focused around, like,
there's this thing that happens. You've been super focused around the healing a lot lately, which I really am happy about, because that's a much better use of your time, and over time feels better for you too. There is something to be said about that. I've known a lot of people over the years who get really caught up in baneful magic. Like that's kind of basically like all they do. And over the course of the time that they do that, they continue to, it's almost like you see these people kind of like, they just grow as people. They just become like darker and darker and more angry and more bitter. and more hostile. And like there's something about, I think, consistently working with the energies that we have to work with around baneful magic that kind of over time, like we kind of see almost like kind of like a downward spiral in those people. So it's yeah, it's always an unfortunate thing to see. And again, I've seen that happen a lot. I've been that person, particularly when I was younger. And I think there is something about not youth necessarily, but being young to a witchcraft practice, right? I think a lot of people who move into witchcraft, well, I'm not even talking like, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just life experience and issues that can come up around identity and personality and personal power. You know, I think that a lot of people, when they first step into practicing witchcraft, and they realize like, oh, like all of what really is possible and capable, and they're coming from a situation in past where maybe they have been victimized, or they have feel for whatever reason as they pursue witchcraft, and they're looking to feel a hole in them or a sense in them where they have felt powerless. And now all of a sudden, here's this really cool thing I can do that is going to empower me, right? Which is absolutely the case. If your witchcraft is not empowering you, if there is no growth or movement or even seeking of power in your witchcraft, what are you even doing? What are you even doing?
What are you even doing, Toby?
You're not practicing witchcraft. I don't know what you're doing. You might be spiritual in some sense, which is wonderful, but there a huge component of being a practicing witch is the seeking of power and empowerment. And then, of course, backing that up with being responsible and accountable for the power that you wield. Anyway, but I think a lot of people, and I'm wondering if this is maybe kind of what we're seeing, this dynamic that we're seeing with the story I was sharing around Israel and this group of people who want to work a curse. They want to send baneful magic at Israel, right? As these are a lot of people who I think for different reasons are coming into witchcraft with this history, this past life experience of being victimized or hurt or, you know, marginalized or disempowered in some way, right? And now they have power in their hand. And rather than in here saying like, I know what it is to feel powerless, and I know what it is to suffer at the hands of other people who don't really have my best interests at heart. I know what this feels like, and now that I have found a source of power and I am growing in this way, I'm going to use my power to make sure that other people who are potentially in a situation to suffer the way that I have, that they don't. Rather than that, now's time to get even with all my bullies, which is also totally okay. Nothing wrong with that, right? Nothing funner than cursing somebody who has bullied you in your life, right? I think that's great, but that should be like a very quick kind of thing, right? Where you're like, okay, I'm adjusting to what it feels like now to hold power. In the process, I may make a misstep or two. I may utilize my power in the wrong way. But that should be a very brief phase before I get to the point where I realize, like, by continuing to perpetuate or by continuing to primarily focus on my need for revenge and getting even and sending baneful magic at people who I feel deserve it or who I want to hurt, right? All that's really doing is perpetuating my own hurt.
It's just keeping the wound toxic,
you know, infected. And really long term, you're not really doing anything of benefit. Right. You're hurting people who maybe deserve to be hurt because of what they've done. But overall, how is that really enriching the lives of anyone else? How is that really ultimately benefiting the world? Right. So again, these are just things I think that we need to kind of think about, particularly in the context of doing baneful magic.
I agree.
Yeah. Hashtag baneful magic is okay. I just need to throw that out there because I'm kind of feeling like I don't want anybody to step away from or walk away from this episode thinking like, oh, well, Mike said baneful magic's bad. I'm like, no, I didn't say that at all.
Baneful magic is good. You just want to do it when there's a time and a place, and because
you are yawning. It's not even late. It's like mid-afternoon. You're yawning.
There's a time and a place, and the time and a place for baneful work is not because a Karen gave you the stank eye in the parking lot.
That's my favorite curses, though.
Maybe a bark, but not like a full-blown curse.
Perhaps you would cellulite. Or
your old nose will grow back.
Yes, exactly. Yes. All their old noses have grown back.
Name the movie. We are going to be doing another podcast with two.
It's our next episode.
Yes,
so
our
next
episode.
2 weeks from now.
and it will be about the missing, murdered Indigenous women's and movement. And we will have Wendy and Inferno on.
Yes, Inferno the Witch will be on.
Yes, Inferno the Witch and Wendy the Witch will be on the list.
Inferno the Witch is Indigenous.
Yes.
And she is going to be centering a working at Captain Cauldron to call to spirits. I believe we're also taking donations.
Yes, we're taking donations.
And
we're calling to the Four Sacred Mountains.
Yes, and to call up protection, to raise awareness, and to send just another source of energy at bringing justice to all of the women. And it's not just women. It's not just women. There have been a lot of two-spirit people. There have been a lot of men, Indigenous men, who have also been victimized by this whatever this is, this clandestine Illuminati, whatever it is that's going on, this human sex trafficking, who knows what it is, right? Behind all that shit. But anyway, so yeah, we're going to be doing that. We'll have them on next, and the whole purpose of bringing that conversation to the podcast, because a lot of people hear that and they're like, well, what does that have to do with witchcraft? But to answer that, I want to say that as witches and as spiritual practitioners, whether maybe you don't call yourself a witch, but as spiritual practitioners, it is our responsibility to be stewards of our world, and that includes humanity. And if something is happening on a very grand scale, like the missing, murdered Indigenous women's / people's movement, right? That's a huge problem in our world.
Yes.
It is a huge problem in our world.
Huge.
Whether you feel it has directly affected you or not. And I assure you, it has. Maybe you're not aware of it, but it has. We need to be utilizing our power toward these causes. We need to be stepping up and helping these causes. We need to be helping these causes on a mundane level.
Most definitely.
Right?
Donate.
Protest. Contact people who you believe maybe are in power, who maybe make decisions around legislation that could help, right? If you see something weird, say something, right? I mean, all that shit, right? But as witches, as spiritual practitioners, we can go beyond those mundane efforts, and we can support those with our spiritual work.
Yes.
And so I'm basically saying the reason we're bringing that to the podcast is that as witches, we fucking have a responsibility to support the missing, murdered, and Indigenous women.
Yes, we do. And for all you people out there who do hape and cacao.
Oh, yes. If you have colonized those Indigenous practices,
and
you need to be
still
doing
burn your white sage, and you're a shaman, princess, Cherokee, blah, 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 and you have Indigenous ancestry,
Cherokee, blah, blah,
and all this other stuff,
well,
and you've done nothing. You've disgraced your ancestors and those spirits you claim to be so close to, and you deserve everything that fucking happens to you. So put up or fucking shut up.
That's a really weird phenomenon that you think about that, because we have here in the area, we have so many people, all white people. We have so many white people in the area, privileged, entitled, white spiritualist, colonizer, white supremacist, white people in the New Age community here in particular, who are all about like ayahuasca and peyote and hape. And
cacao.
What's the other one? The cacao ceremonies have become really huge here. And most of the people who are doing those are not even doing them traditionally. What's the other one that is like so big? It starts with an S. It's another big one. It's kind of like
Sananga.
Is it Sananga? I think no, that's not quite right. It's something like that. But anyway, but you're right, absolutely right. The point you just made. You've got all of these people that are basically spiritual tourists, and that they're taking these things and utilizing things for the wrong reason, because we know at the end of it, it's all just basically about being able to check out of reality. These people, there's no real spiritual component to this. But then these are the same people that will turn a blind eye to any of the crimes against Indigenous communities. The way that capitalism and corporate America have poisoned the planet, where a lot of those herb and plant spirits grow naturally, right? Like they completely divest themselves of any of that responsibility, but they still want to be able to be a part of those things, right? It's the worst. It is among the worst kinds of. I don't even consider that spiritual behavior. It's just fucking. I don't even know what you could call that. It's disgusting.
It's capitalism. It's parasitic.
It's
parasitic. It's colonization in the 21st century. It's appropriation. It's misappropriation. It is not appreciation. I don't care if you're drinking cacao in honor of Great Mother, whoever. It's not appreciation.
It's always the same dumb shit. It's always like Pachamama, and it's like, wait a minute. No, or no, that's not the right one. Which one is the right thing? Who's the she's a goddess that the Pacific Islander communities work with. I can't remember her name now because she's not part of my practices, so I don't remember her name. But I was talking with somebody once, and they were talking about doing a plant spirit ceremony that was going to be honoring this goddess that was like is commonly acknowledged throughout the Pacific Islands. And I was just dumbfounded by the conversation because the plant spirit ceremony that they were going to would had nothing to do with this Pacific Islander culture. And I'm like, okay, one, not only are you a spiritual colonizer, but you are totally mixing up these traditions and these practices, and in the process, potentially disrespecting all of these spirits and the ancestors of these practices. You know, I didn't say anything because this was not somebody that was going to hear that conversation, right? The cognitive dissonance was strong with this one. But it's odd when you think about that kind of shit, though. The mental gymnastics that some of these people do to be able to justify their actions. Makes me want to do baneful magic.
Yeah. I've had the same interaction with someone who wanted conjure work in hoodoo and voodoo, but didn't want to actually.
Those are always my favorites because they'll be like, "Oh yeah, you know, I'm all about the hoodoo and Marie Laveau." I love it. And you look and they've got like a mule deer hanging around their fucking neck, like
yeah, or they're like, "No, Baron Samedi is my patron." I'm like, really? Yeah, I evoke Baron Samedi all the time. I'm like, okay, do you evoke Baron Samedi first or Papa Legba? I don't have initiations for Papa Legba. Okay, then you most certainly do not have any form of initiation for Baron Samedi because you go through Papa Legba first.
Yeah.
Period. Point blank. Yeah. Anyway, I think we've yammered on enough.
I think so. Hopefully some of what we talked about today was
beneficial.
That is beneficial. You know, I
educational.
I think my goal at this point, you know, we are the salty witches, but I think the personal goal I try to keep in my brain when we're doing the podcast is I'm like bitchy, but also beneficial. Like I can be bitchy and beneficial.
Yeah. Edgy, but educational.
Yeah, like if I'm one or the other, like if I'm just bitchy, then I haven't really benefited anybody, right?
True.
And I should just take that somewhere off podcast, right? But I also feel like if I'm just beneficial without any little bitchiness in there, then we're not really the salty witches.
It's true.
So
yeah. Anyway, have a good evening or daytime or whatever, and we will see you soon.